Lyra pressed her back against the cold stone wall of the castle corridor, her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst. The sounds of the grand celebration echoed through the hall's music, laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Night was perfect for what she had planned. Everyone would be too busy enjoying themselves to notice one missing person. She had been planning this escape for 3 long months. Every detail had been carefully thought out, every possible problem considered. The small bag hidden under her dress contained everything she needed: some food, a few precious crystals that could be traded for supplies, and most importantly, the access codes to the escape pods. Getting those codes had been the hardest part. She had to pretend to be interested in her husband's work, asking innocent questions about the security systems. Zarkith was so proud of his technology that he never suspected his wife was gathering information to use against him. Thought she was just another pretty face, too simple to understand anything important. How wrong he was. Lyra had been born on Zephyria Prime, where the cities sparkled like jewels under twin suns. But all that beauty meant nothing when you were trapped in a life you never chose. Her parents had arranged her marriage to Lord Zarkith when she was barely 18, trading her freedom for political power and wealth. They called it an honor. She called it a prison. The first few months of marriage had been difficult, but she had tried to make the best of it. She told herself that maybe, in time, she could find some happiness. Maybe Zarkith would turn out to be kinder than he seemed. Maybe they could build something together. But as the months passed, things only got worse. Zarkith didn't want a wife. He wanted a decoration, something beautiful to show off at parties, something that would make other men jealous. He didn't care about her thoughts, her dreams, or her feelings. When she tried to express her opinions, he would laugh and tell her that thinking was not her job. The worst part was the loneliness. She was surrounded by servants and guards, but she had no real friends. Everyone in the castle was afraid of Zarkith, and that fear extended to her as well. They were polite but distant, treating her like a precious object that might break if handled too roughly. That's when the strange things started happening. At first, it was just small things. She would know what someone was about to say before they said it. She could sense when someone was lying to her. Sometimes she could even feel what other people were feeling, their anger, their fear, their sadness. It was confusing and frightening. She tried to ignore it, telling herself it was just her imagination. But the abilities grew stronger. One day, when a servant was about to drop a valuable vase, she somehow knew it was going to happen and caught it before it fell. Another time, she woke up in the middle of the night, knowing that someone was trying to break into the castle, and she was right. She realized she was reading minds. This terrified her more than anything else. On Zephyria Prime, people with special mental abilities were either treated like gods or turned into slaves, depending on who controlled them. If Zarkith found out about her powers, he would either sell her to the highest bidder or use her as a weapon. Either way, she would lose what little freedom she had left. So she learned to hide her abilities, to push them down deep inside herself where no one could see them. It was exhausting, like trying to hold her breath all the time. She had no choice. The breaking point came 3 months ago. She had been walking through the castle gardens when she accidentally picked up Zarkov's thoughts. What she discovered made her blood run cold. He wasn't just a cruel husband. He was involved in things that could destroy entire worlds. He was selling weapons to criminals, helping corrupt politicians, and planning things that would hurt millions of innocent people. That night, she made her decision. She had to escape, and she had to find a way to stop him. Now, as she crept through the castle halls, she could hear her husband's voice booming with laughter from the great hall. He was probably telling his friends about his latest business deal, not knowing that his wife was about to disappear forever. She reached the hangar where the escape pods were kept. The guards were gone. They were all at the party, just as she had hoped. Her hands shook as she entered the access codes, but they worked perfectly. The pod's door opened with a soft hiss. The escape pod was small, just big enough for one person and a few supplies. It wasn't designed for long trips, but it would get her away from Zephyria Prime. After that, she would have to figure out her next move. She climbed into the pilot's seat and started the launch sequence. The pod's engines hummed to life, and she felt a moment of pure joy. She was actually doing it. She was actually getting away. But as the pod lifted off from the castle, alarms started blaring. Somehow they had discovered her escape faster than she had expected. Through the pod's small window, she could see other ships launching from the castle, chasing after her. Her heart sank as she realized they were faster than her little pod. She pushed the engines as hard as they would go, but it wasn't enough. The pursuit ships were gaining on her, and she knew that if they caught her, Zarketh would make sure she never got another chance to escape. That's when they started shooting. The first blast barely missed her, but it damaged one of her pod's wings. The second hit damaged her engine. The pod started spinning out of control, and she struggled to keep it stable. She managed to get it pointed toward a nearby space station, but she knew she wasn't going to make it there in one piece. The pod crashed into the station's docking bay with a sound like thunder. Metal scraped against metal, sparks flew everywhere, and then everything went black. When she woke up, she was lying on a medical bed in a small room. Her head was pounding and her left arm was wrapped in bandages. A man was sitting in a chair nearby, watching her with careful eyes. He was tall and strong-looking, with dark hair and scars on his hands that suggested he had seen plenty of fighting. His clothes were simple, but clean, and he had the kind of face that looked like it didn't smile very often. But his eyes weren't cruel like Zarkoth's. They were just tired. "You're awake," he said simply. "Good." I was starting to worry. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her body. "Where am I?" she asked. "My space station. Crashed into my docking bay about 6 hours ago. You're lucky to be alive." He leaned forward slightly. "The question is, who are you and why? Were you being chased by military ships?" Lyra looked into his eyes and made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. "Please," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You have to hide me. If my husband finds me, he'll kill me." The man's expression didn't change, but she saw something shift in his eyes. "Your husband? He's not a good man," she said, tears starting to form. "He's done terrible things, and I found out about them. That's why I had to run. Please, I'm begging you. Hide me in your room. Hide me anywhere. Just don't let him find me." Before the man could answer, an alarm started blaring throughout the station. Through the small window, they could see ships approaching, big, dangerous-looking ships with weapons that could destroy the entire station. "Too late," the man said grimly. "Looks like your husband found you." Thane looked at the scared woman lying on the medical bed, then at the approaching ships on his scanner. He had been alone on this station for 2 years, and in all that time, he had never faced a decision quite like this one. His military training told him to stay neutral, to avoid getting involved in other people's problems. But something about her desperate plea touched a part of his heart he thought had died long ago. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Lyra," she whispered, trying to sit up despite her injuries. "And you are?" "Commander Thanecross, though the commander part doesn't mean much anymore." He stood up and moved to the window, watching the AS. Ships get closer. "How many people are on those ships?" "I don't know exactly, but Zarketh always travels with at least 20 guards. Her voice trembled as she spoke her husband's name. "He's very powerful, and he's very angry. If he finds me." "He won't," Thane said, surprising himself with how quickly he made the decision. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though he could see it would be painful for her. "I think so." "Good. We need to get you hidden before they arrive." He helped her stand up, supporting her weight when she swayed. "My personal quarters have a hidden compartment. It was designed for emergency situations, but I think this counts." As they made their way through the station's corridors, Thane found himself wondering why he was helping this stranger. 2 years ago, he had been a respected military officer with a bright future ahead of him. He had commanded ships, led troops into battle, and earned medals for his service. But all of that ended when he refused to follow an order that would have killed innocent civilians. His superiors called it insubordination. He called it having a conscience. The court-martial had been swift and brutal. They stripped him of his rank, his honors, and his future. Then they stuck him on this remote research station, telling him it was better than prison. Some days he wasn't so sure about that. The station was originally built to study the gas giant it orbited, but the research project had been abandoned years ago. Now it was just a forgotten outpost in the middle of nowhere with him as its only resident. The equipment, monitoring space traffic, and trying not to think about how his life had fallen apart. But as he helped Lyra walk toward his quarters, he realized he felt more alive than he had in months. Maybe it was because he finally had someone to talk to. Maybe it was because he was finally doing something that mattered again. In here, he said, opening the door to his room, was simple but clean, a bed, a desk, some personal belongings, and a small viewing window that looked out at the stars. The hidden compartment is behind that panel. He pressed a sequence of buttons on the wall, and a section slid away to reveal a small space just big enough for one person. It had been designed as a panic room, somewhere he could hide if the station was ever attacked. There was even a small air supply and communication system. It's not very comfortable, he admitted, but it's completely hidden from any scans they might run. Lyra looked at the cramped space and then at him. You're really going to help me? Out. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said simply. I know you're scared, and I know you're running from someone who wants to hurt you. That's all I need to know. She touched his arm gently. Thank you. I know this is dangerous for you. Before he could respond, the station's communication system crackled to life. Attention, space station. This is Lord Zarketh of the Zephyrian Fleet. We are conducting a search for a stolen vessel. Prepare to be boarded. Thane and Lyra looked at each other. Get in, he said quietly. And whatever happens, stay absolutely quiet. She climbed into the hidden compartment, and he sealed it behind her. Then he quickly changed into his most casual clothes and messed up his hair, trying to look like someone who had just woken up from a nap. The docking bay doors opened with a loud clang, and heavy footsteps echoed through the station. Thane counted at least 15 different sets of boots, maybe more. He settled into his chair and pretended to be reading a technical manual when they reached his quarters. Open this door immediately, demanded a voice from outside. Thane took his time getting up, making sure he looked appropriately annoyed. When he opened the door, he found himself facing a group of armed soldiers in expensive armor. Their leader was a tall, imposing man with cold eyes and an even colder smile. We're looking for a stolen escape pod, Zarketh replied, his eyes scanning the room. It was tracked to this location. You're welcome to look around, Thane said, stepping aside. Though I have to say, it's been pretty quiet here lately. It's just me and the maintenance robots. As the soldiers searched his quarters, Thane found himself studying Zarketh. The man carried himself like someone who was used to getting his way, someone who had never been told no. His clothes were expensive, his weapons were top quality, and his soldiers followed his orders without question. But there was something else about him, something that made Thane's skin crawl. You're the disgraced commander, aren't you? Zarketh said suddenly. Thane Cross. I remember hearing about your court-martial. That's ancient history, Thane replied, though he felt his jaw tighten. I'm just a maintenance worker now. Yes. I heard about that unfortunate incident, something about refusing to follow orders. Zarkoth's smile grew wider. The kind of man who can sleep at night? Thane said quietly. Inside the hidden compartment, Lyra was trying to stay calm, but her heart was racing. She could hear every word of the conversation, and she knew that her husband was trying to provoke Thane. That was how Zarketh operated. He found people's weak spots and pushed until they broke. But something strange was happening. Her mental abilities, which she had been suppressing for so long, were starting to activate on their own. Maybe it was the stress, or maybe it was being so close to her husband after months of freedom, but she could suddenly sense the thoughts and emotions of everyone in the room. From the soldiers, she felt boredom and impatience. But from Zarketh, she felt something much darker. He wasn't just looking for her. He was enjoying this. He liked intimidating. People liked making them afraid. And from Thane, she felt something that surprised her. Was angry, yes, but not just about Zarketh's taunts. He was angry about what had happened to his career, about being stuck on this station, about feeling useless. But underneath all that anger, she sensed something else, a deep loneliness that matched her own. Sir, one of the soldiers said, we've completed our search. No sign of the escape pod or its pilot. Zarkoth's eyes narrowed. Are you certain? Check the docking bay again. We already did, sir. 3 times there's some debris that might be from a crash but no intact vessel. The pilot could have survived, Zarkith insisted. Keep looking, sir, with respect, if someone crashed into this station, they would have needed medical attention. And there's only one person here. The soldier gestured toward Thane. If he was hiding someone, we would have found them by now. Lyra held her breath, praying that the soldier was right. But she could sense Zarkov's suspicion, his refusal to believe that she might have escaped his grasp. Very well, Zarkov said finally, but I want this station monitored. If anyone tries to leave, I want to know about it immediately. Sir, as the soldiers prepared to leave, Zarkith turned back to Thane. All you'd have to do is keep your eyes open and report anything unusual. I appreciate the offer, Thane said, his voice. But remember, opportunities like this don't come along very often, especially for someone in your position. After they left, Thane waited a full hour before opening the hidden compartment. When he did, he found Lyra curled up in the small space, tears streaming down her face. He knows, she whispered. He knows I'm here somewhere. He won't give up. No. Then we'll just have to make sure he doesn't find you, Thane said, surprising himself again with his determination. As he helped her sit down on his bed, he realized that something had changed during Zarkov's visit. The loneliness that had been eating at him for 2 years was gone, replaced by something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose? Why are you helping me? Lyra asked again. Thane looked at her, this brave woman who had risked everything to escape, a life she couldn't bear. Because someone needs to, he said simply. And because I think we both could use a friend. But even as he said it, he wondered if friendship was all he was starting to feel for her. After Zarkov's soldiers left, Lyra sat on Thane's bed, her whole body shaking. The fear was slowly leaving her system, but it was being replaced by something else. Exhaustion. Using her mental abilities to sense everyone's thoughts had drained her more than she expected. Are you okay? Thane asked, sitting down beside her. You look pale. I'm fine, she started to say, but suddenly her vision blurred and she swayed sideways. Thane caught her before she could fall. No, you're not fine, he said gently, helping her lie down. What happened in there? Seemed different after they left. Lyra looked at him, studying his face. Could she trust him with her biggest secret? She had spent so many years hiding her abilities, pretending to be normal. But after what he had just done for her, after he had risked his own safety to protect her, she felt like she owed him the truth. There's something about me that I haven't told you, she said quietly. Something that makes me different from other people. Thane waited patiently for her to continue, not pushing her to speak faster than she was ready to. I can read minds, she said finally. Not all the time, and not always clearly, but sometimes I can sense what people are thinking and feeling. She expected him to laugh, or to look at her like she was crazy. Instead, he just nodded thoughtfully. That's how you knew Zarkith was. Suspicious, he said. You could sense it. Yes, and I could sense your anger and the soldier's boredom, and she paused, not sure if she should tell him about the loneliness she had felt from him. And what? He asked gently. And I could sense that you've been alone for a long time, she said softly. Just like I have. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them processing what she had revealed. Then Thane spoke. How long have you been able to do this? It started after I got married, she said. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but it got stronger over time. I think it was my mind's way of protecting me. Protecting you from what? Lyra took a deep breath. She had never told anyone the full story of her marriage, not even her own family. But something about Thane made her feel safe enough to share it. Zarketh wasn't just a bad husband, she said. He was cruel in ways that I still have nightmares about. He would say things to make me feel small and worthless. He would ignore me for days, then suddenly demand my attention. He treated me like I was his property, not a person. Thane's hands clenched into fists, but his voice remained gentle. I'm sorry you went through that. The worst part was that everyone thought I was so lucky, she continued. Here I was, married to a powerful lord, living in a beautiful castle, wearing expensive clothes. From the outside, it looked perfect. But inside, I was dying a little bit every day. That's when your abilities started. Yes, I think my mind was trying to warn me about danger, to help me survive. But it also showed me things I wish I had never seen. She shuddered. Zarkath's thoughts are ... dark. He enjoys causing pain, and he's involved in things that could hurt millions of people. What kind of things? He sells weapons to criminal organizations. He helps corrupt politicians eliminate their rivals. He's planning to overthrow the Galactic Council and install his own people in power. She looked at Thane with desperate eyes. That's why I had to escape. It wasn't just about saving myself anymore. Someone has to stop him. Thane was quiet for a long moment, absorbing everything she had told him. Finally, he spoke. My court-martial, he said slowly. The incident that ended my career, Zarkath was involved in that. What do you mean? I was ordered to attack a civilian transport ship. My superiors said it was carrying weapons for terrorists, but something didn't feel right. I refused to fire, and it turned out the ship was full of families fleeing a war zone. He paused. Later, I found out that the order came from someone high up in the political chain, someone who wanted those families dead because they had witnessed something they shouldn't have. You think it was Zarkath? I know it was. He was working with the politicians who wanted to cover up their crimes. When I refused to follow orders, I ruined their plan. That's why they came down so hard on me during the court-martial. Lyra reached out and took his hand. I'm sorry. You lost everything because you did the right thing. I thought I lost everything, he said, looking at their joined hands. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I just needed to find something worth fighting for again. Before she could respond, the station's communication system crackled to life again. But this time, it wasn't Zarkath's voice they heard. Attention, space station. This is Captain Vex of the Hunter's Moon. We understand you might be harboring a fugitive. We're prepared to pay handsomely for information. Thane and Lyra looked at each other in alarm. Bounty hunters, Thane said grimly. There's more came. Another voice over the come. Captain Drax of the Star Viper here. We've got the entire sector surrounded. Nobody leaves without our permission. And this is Commander Yates of the Iron Fist. We know she's here somewhere. Hand her over and we'll make sure you get a share of the reward. Lyra buried her face in her hands. He's put a bounty on me. That's why there are so many ships out there. Thane moved to the control panel and checked his sensors. What he saw made his blood run cold. There were at least a dozen ships surrounding the station, and more were arriving every hour. How much do you think he's offering? Thane asked. Knowing Zarkath, probably enough to buy a small planet, Lyra said bitterly. Doesn't care about the money, just wants to make sure everyone in the galaxy knows what happens to people who cross him. Well, they're not getting you, Thane said firmly. I don't care how much money they're offering. You could take it, Lyra said quietly. You could turn me in and be rich enough to start over somewhere else. Thane looked at her like she had suggested he'd jump out of an airlock. Is that what you think of me? No, she said quickly. I just... ... I don't understand why you're helping me. You barely know me. Oh. I know enough, he said, echoing his words from earlier. I know you're brave enough to risk everything to escape a terrible situation. I know you're trying to stop a man who wants to hurt innocent people. And I know that you're the first person in 2 years who's made me feel like I have a purpose. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the danger surrounding them seemed to fade away. There was something growing between them, something that neither of them had expected, but both of them could feel. Thane, she said softly. Oh, yes, thank you. For everything. He reached out and gently touched her face, wiping away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. You don't have to thank me. We're in this together now. But even as he said it, they both knew their situation was getting more desperate by the hour. The bounty hunters weren't going to give up, and eventually they would find a way to search the station more thoroughly. We need to get out of here, Thane said. Where with all those ships out there, it's going to be almost impossible. What about the escape pods? Lyra asked. It'd shoot us down before we got 100 meters from the station. Then what do we do? Before Thane could answer, another voice came over the comm system. This one was different from the others, older, more authoritative. This is Admiral Corgan of the Galactic Council Navy. We have reports of a legal bounty. Hunting activity in this sector. All unauthorized vessels have 10 minutes to leave the area or face military action. Thane and Lyra looked at each other with new hope. Maybe they weren't as alone as they thought. But their relief was short-lived. Another voice, cold and familiar, cut through the cum chatter. "This is Lord Zarketh. Admiral, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. We're conducting a lawful search for a dangerous criminal. I have all the proper documentation." "Very well, Lord Zarketh. You have authorization to continue your search. All bounty hunters, however, must leave immediately." As the bounty hunters' ships began to move away, Lyra felt her heart sink. Zarketh had just eliminated his competition. Now he could search for her without interference. "He's coming back," she whispered. "Then we better be ready for him," Thane said, his voice grim but determined. Thane moved quickly through the station, checking every system and every possible escape route. With the bounty hunters gone, Zarketh would be back soon, and this time he wouldn't be fooled by a simple search. He would tear the station apart, piece by piece, until he found what he was looking for. "How long do we have?" Lyra asked, following close behind him. "Maybe an hour if we're lucky," Thane replied, pulling up the station's defense systems on his computer. He'll want to prepare for a more thorough search this time. "What can we do? There's nowhere to run." Thane studied the screen, his military mind working through their options. The station wasn't built for combat, but it did have some basic defensive capabilities. There were energy shields, some automated defense guns, and emergency systems that could be turned into weapons if someone knew what they were doing. "We can't run," he said finally, "but maybe we can fight against all those ships." Lyra looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Thane, there are dozens of them out there." "I know, but this station has some tricks that even I didn't know about until recently." He pulled up another screen showing the station's power grid. It was originally built as a research facility, but before that, it was a military outpost. Some of the old systems are still here, just hidden. As he worked, Lyra watched his face. She could see the change in him, the way his shoulders straightened, the way his eyes focused. This was the commander he used to be, the man who had led troops into battle and earned their respect. "Tell me what to do," she said. "Are you sure? This is going to be dangerous." "I'm tired of running," she said firmly, "and I'm tired of being afraid. If we're going to do this, let's do it together." Thane looked at her with new admiration. When he first found her, she had been scared and helpless. But over the past few days, he had watched her grow stronger. She was no longer just a victim. She was a survivor, and she was ready to fight. "For her freedom? Okay," he said. "First, we need to get to the main control room. From there, I can activate the old defense systems, but we'll need to work together to make it happen." They made their way through the station's corridors, and Thane explained his plan. The station's main computer was connected to everything: the shields, the weapons, the life support, even the artificial gravity. If they could take control of all these systems, they might be able to create enough chaos to escape. "What about my abilities?" Lyra asked. "Can they help somehow?" "Actually, yes," Thane said, stopping at a control panel. "If you can sense what the attackers are thinking, you might be able to predict their moves. That could give us a huge advantage." As they reached the control room, Thane's sensors picked up movement outside. Zarketh's ships were approaching again, but this time there were more of them. And they weren't coming in slowly like before. They were coming in fast and hard. "Here we go," Thane muttered, his hands flying over the controls. The first ship docked with a loud crash that shook the entire station. Within minutes, they could hear the sound of cutting tools working on the airlock doors. "They're not even bothering to ask permission this time," Lyra observed. "Zarketh knows we're here," Thane said. "The question is whether we can stay ahead of them long enough to get away." As the soldiers broke through the outer defenses, Thane activated the station's internal security systems. Emergency lights started flashing, blast doors slammed shut throughout the station, and automated defense guns emerged from hidden panels in the walls. "That should slow them down," he said with satisfaction. But Lyra had closed her eyes and was concentrating on her mental abilities. "They're splitting up," she said. 3 groups. One is heading for the main power generator. One is coming toward us. and one is searching the living quarters. Smart, Thane admitted grudgingly. They're trying to cut our power while searching. For us, at the same time, there's something else, Lyra said, her voice tense. Zarketh isn't with the soldiers. He's still on his ship, watching everything from a safe distance. Of course he is. He's not the type to risk his own neck. Thane pulled up another screen. But that might work in our favor. If he's not here to give orders directly, his soldiers might make mistakes. As if to prove his point, an explosion echoed through the station. One of the soldier groups had triggered a booby trap that Thane had quickly set up in the corridor leading to the power generator. One group down, he said with grim satisfaction, but the remaining soldiers were adapting quickly. Lyra could sense their thoughts as they changed their tactics, moving more carefully and communicating with each other more frequently. They're learning, she warned, and they're getting close to the control room. Then it's time for Phase 2, Thane said. He activated another set of controls, and suddenly the artificial gravity in several sections of the station shut off. Through the security cameras, they could see soldiers floating helplessly in the corridors, unable to control their movement. That's brilliant, Lyra said, impressed despite the danger they were in. I learned a few tricks during my military career, Thane said with a slight smile, but we're not done yet. He activated the station's emergency evacuation system, which filled the corridors with a thick, harmless smoke. Between the floating soldiers, the emergency lights, and the smoke, the station had become a confusing maze. But even as they watched their enemies struggle, both Thane and Lyra knew this was only buying them time. Eventually the soldiers would adapt, and when they did, the station's defenses wouldn't be enough to stop them. We need to get to the escape pod, Thane said. I've been modifying it while you were recovering. Should be able to get us away from here. But what about all the ships outside? Won't they just shoot us down? Not if we're smart about it. Thane pulled up a star map. There's an asteroid field about 10 minutes from here. If we can make it there, we can hide among the rocks until they give up searching. As they prepared to leave the control room, Lyra suddenly grabbed Thane's arm. Wait, she said. I'm sensing something. Zarketh is. He's angry, really angry. He's not just planning to capture me anymore. What do you mean he's going to destroy the station with us on it? Her face was pale with fear. He's decided that if he can't have me back, no one can have me. Thane felt his blood run cold. He had faced death before in battle and in dangerous situations, but this was different. This wasn't about military objectives or strategic goals. This was personal, and that made Zarketh even more dangerous. How long do we have? He asked. Not long. He's charging his weapons now. They ran through the station toward the docking bay, where Thane had hidden the modified escape pod. Behind them, they could hear the soldiers breaking through the security barriers, getting closer with each passing minute. As they reached the docking bay, Thane's worst fears were confirmed. Through the viewports, he could see Zarkoth's main ship positioning itself for an attack. The massive vessel's weapons were glowing with deadly energy. Get in the pod, he told Lyra urgently. I need to launch us manually. What about you? I'll be right behind you. Just get in and strap yourself down. As Lyra climbed into the escape pod, Thane worked frantically at the launch controls. The pod's engines were already running, but he needed to time their escape perfectly. Too early, and Zarkoth's ships would have time to target them. It's too late, and they would be caught in the explosion when the station was destroyed. Through her mental abilities, Lyra could sense the soldiers getting closer. They had almost reached the docking bay. At the same time, she could feel Zarkoth's cold satisfaction as he prepared to fire on the station. Thane, hurry, she called out. Almost there, he replied, his fingers flying over the controls. That's when the first energy blast hit the station. The entire structure shook like it was being hit by an earthquake, and lights flickered throughout. The docking bay? Thane dove into the escape pod just as the second blast hit. Hold on, he yelled, hitting the launch button. The pod shot out of the docking bay just as the station began to break apart behind them. Through the rear viewport, they could see the structure that had been Thane's home for 2 years crumbling into space debris. But they weren't safe yet. Zarkoth's ships had spotted them and weapons fire began lighting up the space around their small vessel. "Can this thing go any faster?" Lyra asked, gripping her seat as the pod shook from near misses. "We're at maximum." "Speed," Thane replied, dodging between pieces of the destroyed station. "But we're almost to the asteroid field." As they flew deeper into the field of floating rocks, the weapons fire behind them became less accurate. The asteroids provided cover, but they also made navigation treacherous. "We made it," Lyra said, as they found a hiding spot among the larger asteroids. But even as she said it, she could sense that Zarkith wasn't giving up. He was ordering his ships to search every hiding place in the asteroid field, and he had all the time in the world to do it. "He's not going to stop," she told Thane. "Not ever. And we'll have to make sure this ends. One way or another," Thane replied grimly. As they sat in their tiny pod, surrounded by enemies, and with nowhere left to run, both of them realized that their next move would determine not just their own fate, but the fate of everyone Zarkith planned to hurt. Hidden among the asteroids, Thane and Lyra sat in their small escape pod, listening to the sound of enemy ships searching for them. Every few minutes a patrol would pass close enough that they could see the lights of their engines through the EZ. "Viewport, how long can we stay here?" Lyra whispered. "Not long," Thane admitted. "Our power won't last more than a few hours, and they're searching in a pattern. Eventually they'll find us." Lyra closed her eyes and reached out with her mental abilities, trying to sense what their enemies were thinking. What she found made her heart race. "Thane," she said urgently, "I can sense something. There are other ships coming. Different ones. More of Zarkath's forces. No, these feel different. Official, military." She concentrated harder. "I think it might be the Galactic Council Navy. Someone must have received the evidence we transmitted before the station was destroyed." Thane quickly checked their communication system. Sure enough, there was a message waiting for them on an encrypted military channel. "This is Admiral Chen of the Galactic Council Fleet," the message said. "We have received evidence of Lord Zarkov's crimes and are moving to arrest him. Any witnesses to his illegal activities are asked to identify themselves and request protection." Thane and Lyra looked at each other with new hope. "Should we answer?" Lyra asked. "It could be a trap," Thane said carefully. "Zarkith has connections in the military. This could be his way of getting us to reveal our location. But what if it's real? What if help has finally arrived?" Before Thane could answer, their sensors detected a massive fleet of ships dropping out of hyperspace. These weren't the sleek, expensive vessels that Zarketh traveled in. These were military ships, built for battle and bearing the official markings of the Galactic Council. "That's a lot of ships for a trap," Thane observed. Through her abilities, Lyra could sense the change in the emotions around them. Zarkath's soldiers, who had been confident and aggressive just minutes before, were now worried and confused. And from Zarkath himself, she felt something she had never sensed from him before. Fear. "He's scared," she said with amazement. "For the first time since I've known him, Zarkith is actually afraid." "Good," Thane said firmly. "It's about time." The space around them suddenly erupted in activity. The council ships moved into formation, surrounding Zarkov's smaller fleet. Warning messages filled the communication channels, ordering all of Zarkath's vessels to stand down and prepare to be boarded. But Zarkath wasn't the type of man to surrender quietly. "All ships, attack pattern 7, they heard him order over the radio. Destroy the council fleet and find that escape pod. I want my wife back, and I want everyone who helped her to pay." The battle that followed was unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. Energy beams lit up the space between the ships. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers, and the asteroid field became a war zone. "We need to get out of here," Thane said, starting the pod's engines. "This whole area is about to become a battlefield." But as they tried to leave their hiding spot, one of Zarkov's patrol ships spotted them. "There they are," came a voice. Over the radio, "Lord Zarkith, we found the escape pod." Suddenly, their small vessel was the center of attention for every ship in the area. Zarkath's forces converged on their position, while the council ships tried to protect them. "Attention, escape pod," came Admiral Chen's voice. "This is the council fleet. Alter course to 27 Mark 4, and we'll provide escort. Thane changed direction, but Zarkoth's ships moved to intercept them. What followed was a desperate chase through the asteroid field, the pod weaving between floating rocks, while energy blasts exploded all around them. "Can you sense what they're planning?" Thane asked, as he piloted the pod through the chaos. Lyra concentrated, reaching out with her abilities. "Zarkoth is trying to cut us off from the Council ships. He's willing to risk everything to get me back, even his own life, especially his own life. He'd rather die than lose control of me." As if to prove her point, Zarkoth's personal ship, a massive vessel bristling with weapons, moved directly into their path. The ship was so large that it blocked out the stars, casting a shadow over their tiny pod. "Surrender now," came Zarkoth's voice over their communicator, "and I might let your friend live." Thane looked at Lyra, waiting for her decision. They both knew that this was the moment of truth, the final choice between freedom and surrender. "Never," Lyra said, her voice steady and strong. "I'll never go back to him." "Then you've made your choice," Zarkoth replied coldly. His ship's main weapon began to charge, a massive energy cannon that could destroy their pod with a single shot. But before he could fire, something unexpected happened. Admiral Chen's flagship, a ship nearly as large as Zarkoth's, moved between them and the escape pod. "Lord Zarkoth," came the Admiral's voice, "you are under arrest for weapons trafficking, political assassination, and crimes against the civilian population. Stand down immediately or face the consequences." "You have no authority over me," Zarkoth snarled back. "I am a noble of Zephyria Prime, and I answer only to my own government." "Your own government has withdrawn their protection," the Admiral replied calmly. "The evidence provided by your wife has been confirmed. You're now considered a criminal by every civilized world in the galaxy." For a moment, there was silence on the communication channels. Then Zarkoth's laughter filled the airwaves, cold, bitter laughter that sent chills down Lyra's spine. "If I can't have her," he said, "then no one can." His ship's weapons powered up again, but this time they weren't aimed at the escape pod. They were aimed at the Admiral's ship, which was now protecting Thane and Lyra. What followed was a battle between two massive vessels, fought at point-blank range among the asteroids. Energy beams carved through space, explosions lit up the darkness, and smaller ships from both fleets joined the fight. Inside their tiny pod, Thane and Lyra could only watch as the fate of the galaxy seemed to hang in the balance. Through her mental abilities, Lyra could sense the thoughts and emotions of everyone involved in the battle. The Council forces were determined to see justice done, while Zarkoth's remaining loyal soldiers were fighting out of fear rather than conviction. And from Zarkoth himself, she sensed something that surprised her desperation. For all his power and wealth, for all his cruelty and arrogance, he was just a man who couldn't accept that he had lost control. The battle reached its climax when Zarkoth's ship, damaged and surrounded, made one final attempt to destroy the escape pod. But as his weapons charged for the killing shot, his own ship suffered a catastrophic power failure. Years of illegal modifications and hasty repairs had finally caught up with him. "His ship is breaking apart," Thane observed, watching through the viewport. Lyra could sense the moment when Zarkoth realized he had lost. The overwhelming anger and hatred that had driven him for so long suddenly collapsed into fear and disbelief. "This isn't over," came his final transmission, his voice filled with rage. "I'll find you, Lyra. Wherever you go, wherever you hide, I'll find you." But even as he spoke, his ship was being torn apart by internal explosions. Within minutes, there was nothing left but debris floating among the asteroids. "It's over," Lyra whispered, hardly daring to believe it. "He's really gone." Admiral Chen's voice came over their communicator, warm and reassuring. "Attention, escape pod. This is Admiral Chen. You're safe now. Please dock with our ship so we can provide medical attention and debrief you on recent events." As their small pod was brought aboard the Admiral's massive vessel, Lyra and Thane were greeted by medical personnel and council officials. For the first time in months, Lyra felt truly safe. "What happens now?" she asked Admiral Chen during their debriefing. "Now you help us clean up the mess that Zarkoth left behind," the Admiral replied. Your testimony and the evidence you provided will help us arrest his accomplices and shut down his criminal network. It's going to take time, but we'll make sure that justice is done. And after that, the Admiral smiled. After that, you're free to live your life however you choose. You've earned that right. 6 months later, Thane and Lyra stood on the SE balcony of their new home, looking out over a peaceful valley where they had built a sanctuary for others escaping dangerous situations. The house was simple but comfortable, surrounded by gardens and filled with the sounds of children playing. Do you ever regret it? Lyra asked, taking Thane's hand. Giving up your military career, your old life? Never, he replied, squeezing her hand gently. I found something better. I found you, and I found a purpose that actually matters. In the months since Zarkath's death, they had worked together to create a place where people could heal from trauma and start new lives. Lyra used her mental abilities to help counsel survivors, while Thane used his military experience to train security teams that protected the vulnerable. Their love had grown slowly and naturally, built on trust, shared experiences, and a deep understanding of each other's pain. They had both been broken by their past experiences, but together they had found a way to heal. Look, Lyra said, pointing to the valley below. A group of children was playing in the gardens, their laughter carrying on the wind. These were children who had been rescued from dangerous situations, just like she had been.
Ow.